Welcome to Processing. In this series of videos, we will describe our guidelines for how to effectively evaluate and post items onto the auction. As an inventory processor, you are the eyes and ears for both the customer and the company. You'll be the first one to see an item when it comes into the warehouse, and it's important that you do a thorough and accurate evaluation of the item's condition, as well as document and photograph all necessary details about the item. Our customers will not see the item they're bidding on in person until they've already won it and are coming to pick it up. So it's up to you to show them everything they need to see to make an informed decision on what they want to buy. As a retail returns auction, each and every item that we receive in our building can come in a variety of conditions. Therefore, it's very important that we stick to some basic principles that show a customer the most important things they would like to see in an item. While these guidelines will help you when making decisions on how to process an item, you should always feel free to reach out to a manager or peer if you have any questions on how to evaluate an item. Let's explore our guidelines and how to approach filling out the processing form. Description, retail price, and clerk notes. When you open the processing application, one of the first things you will be filling out is the item description and retail price. To do this, you will scan the UPC or applicable barcode on the item, and a retail description for the item as well as the retail price should load automatically into the processing form. If the information loads and everything appears correct, then you can move along. There are times, however, when no information is found through that scan, or the information that loads is clearly incorrect. In these cases, you will need to do a little research to find the correct description and price. If the item came in retail packaging, or you can see things like the brand, model number, or other identifying information listed on the item, then you will need to search websites like Amazon, Target, Home Depot, and other similar retailers until you find the appropriate retail description. Copy the description and retail price from that page and enter them into the processing form. Please refrain when possible from using generalized descriptions such as generic electric guitar or standard toaster oven when filling in the information manually. If you cannot find the appropriate information online, then ask your manager for further direction on what to enter for that item. Lastly, product sizing for things such as mattresses, clothing, and TVs should always be included in the description even if it does not auto-load. While there are certain notes that are acceptable to place in the description, it is important to understand what should be included in that line and what should go in the clerk notes section. Most pieces of information that a customer should know will come through accurate selections in the processing form or the retail description itself. There are times, however, when you will want to include more detailed information than what is communicated in the processing form. Examples include stating specific missing parts on an item, describing damage in detail, and so forth. For most of these scenarios, you will want to place this information in the clerk notes. Remember that your comments in the clerk notes should also align with your selections in the processing form. For example, if you state that a stroller is missing its front left wheel, then you also should have selected missing parts yes in the processing form. Now let's talk about the item status and evaluating the condition of the item. Item status. The next step in our process is to fill out information about the status of the item. Let's dive into what each of the status questions mean and how to evaluate what the right answer is for each one. First is the item condition. This prompt would like you to determine if the item is new or used. A new item at Nellis Auction is one that appears to have very light or no signs of usage whatsoever. Because these items are retail returns, the packaging may not always be sealed or in great condition, even if the item looks brand new. That is okay, and if the item appears brand new, is factory sealed, or looks like its internal packaging is factory packed, then the item should be considered new regardless of the exterior box's physical condition. If the item itself shows signs of use or wear and tear, such as a skateboard with scratches on the wheels, or a rug with dirt stains, then the item should be listed as used. Next, we will look at damage. This is categorized in three ways: which are no damage, minor damage, or major damage. No damage indicates the item is in perfect or near perfect condition. Very slight cosmetic issues can still be considered no damage if they are not very noticeable and don't affect item functionality. Minor damage indicates that there may be some noticeable cosmetic damage to the item, but the damage will not prohibit the item from being used for its intended purpose. This would include scenarios like a small stain on a rug, chipped or scratched furniture, or light scratches on a phone screen. Finally, major damage would indicate that there is significant damage to the item which can either compromise its structural integrity or its functionality. Examples would include things like a cracked screen on a TV, a suitcase with the handle broken off, or a chair missing one of its legs. Even if an item has major damage, it can still be sold. However, if an item is damaged beyond any chance of repair or safe usage, such as completely shattered mirrors, an open food item, or a frayed charging cord, then it should be trashed. If you are unsure if a majorly damaged item should be sold or trashed, then bring the item to the attention of a manager for further evaluation. If you select minor or major damage, be sure to list the specific damage in your clerk notes as well as documenting the damage with pictures. Examples would be stating things like, monitor is cracked in the top left corner, or there is a dent on the right side of this crockpot. This is very important information to include. This will help a customer make a well-informed decision, ensure the customer is not surprised with the condition of the item when coming to pick it up, and will in turn help prevent misdescribed returns. The next section is missing parts. This section is to help inform the customer if there are any important components of the item that are missing. You have the option to select yes, no, or unknown. To understand if any components are missing, you can check things such as user manuals, product information details, what the description itself is listing, or visual inspection that leads you to believe something is missing, like an item-shaped hole in the styrofoam packing. In most scenarios, you should be able to determine if anything is missing. If the item is missing parts, select yes, and then in the clerk notes, list all components of the item you know to be missing, such as camera mount is missing from the tripod. Unknown should be reserved for scenarios in which we are unable to fully identify what the item is, what it came with, or there are so many pieces that we cannot verify it is all there. A good example would be selling an opened Lego set. Unknown should be used sparingly, and selecting yes should only be done if you can verify that something that should be there is not. If it looks like everything is included, then select no for missing parts. Next, we'll talk about functionality. This section is your opportunity to let the customer know if the item is in working order. Where possible, we should be testing items to ensure they are working, like plugging in a vacuum cleaner and seeing if it turns on. Many items can also be assumed to be in working condition, like a water bottle or a basketball. If the item does not work as intended, such as an electronic that doesn't turn on, a skateboard that is missing its wheels, or other similar issues, then you will select no. Lastly, there are many items that we don't have the time or ability to test, such as generators, treadmills, and refrigerators. In these circumstances, unless there is something leading you to believe that the item won't be functional without testing, then you should select that it is functional, and then in your clerk notes, state you are unable to test the item. Now let's talk about packaging. This item status in the processing form is asking you whether or not packaging is present for the item. This section is fairly straightforward, and so long as there is packaging present, then select yes. If it is a loose item that we have to bag ourselves, then select no. Next is assembly required. This selection indicates to the customer whether or not the item must be assembled by them in order to be used. Examples of that would include things like disassembled furniture and bookcases which need to be put together. If the item cannot be utilized right out of the box without putting pieces of it together, then you should select yes to assembly required. If the item can be used straight out of the box, such as a laptop, water bottle, or basketball, then you can select no to assembly required. Lastly, you will be asked to select the item size if it did not auto-load when you first scanned the UPC or applicable barcode. We have 4 size categories, which are small, medium, large, and extra large. These size categories are measured in linear inches, and the threshold between the minimum and maximum amount of linear inches for each size category is labeled in the processing form. Linear inches are a sum of the height, width, and length of the item. If this information does not auto-load, then you can either find the dimensions and add them together from a retailer's website, or use your best judgment to categorize the size of the item. This is important because it will give the customer an understanding of how big the item is that they are buying, and it helps us determine the best spot for the item to go in our warehouse when putting the item on one of our racks prior to auction. Photographs. Photos are a very important part of making a good auction listing. The photos will be the only direct visual a customer will have on an item when deciding whether or not to bid. A good photo can vastly increase the interest that a potential buyer will have in the item, and we should always strive for photos that have a strong presentation and show all necessary information on an item. There are some key components to having good photographs. First is framing and lighting. Items should be centered in the frame and be the main focus of the photo. Ensure that the item and its surroundings look presentable, and the item is well centered and filling as much of the frame as is reasonable, which will give the customer the best view possible. Always avoid there being trash and clutter in the background of your photo. Also keep an eye on the lighting of your photo to ensure there is not any type of glare or heavy shadows which can obscure the item in the photo. Here are some examples of good photos and insufficient photos. Knowing the right number of photos is important as well. The number of photos needed for an item depends on a variety of factors such as price, number of components, and showing important identifying information. All items should include a stock photo from a retailer's website when available. General merchandise or items that are less than $50 in retail price should only require 1 to 2 live photos to show everything a customer would need to see. Higher dollar items may require multiple photos in order to encapsulate everything a customer would feel is important. Examples would include showing all angles of a piece of furniture, taking photos of every piece in a hardware set, documenting serial numbers on expensive electronics like computers and phones, and so forth. There is no limit to the number of photos you can take, and having the right amount of photos will both help the customer make an informed decision as well as aiding the warehouse operations when they need to interact with the item as well. Tips and guidelines. Now let's talk about some general tips and guidelines that you should keep in mind while processing. First is care and consideration of the product. At all times, you should work to handle items with care and leave them in the same condition that you found them in. This starts right from the moment that you open the box with your box cutter. Ensure that you cut along the edges where the tape is, and not through the main structure of the box. Just as well, be careful not to cut too deep into the packaging, or you may end up cutting the item too. Remove all items from the box carefully, and as best as possible, place them back in the box in a neat and orderly fashion when finished. Double check your station before resealing the box to make sure you didn't forget to put anything back. Tape the box closed once you've replaced all of the items to ensure they will not fall out when transported throughout the warehouse. Next is inventory sticker placement. The inventory number is an incredibly important sticker that is used throughout the warehouse and customer experience operation once the item is inventoried. The sticker should always go on the short side of the packaging, usually on the top or bottom, so that when it is stored on the shelves, the inventory number can face outward and be easily found by the next employee that needs to interact with that item. Now we'll talk about our different programs. We receive our product from a multitude of vendors, and we call each of these vendors programs. Programs can come from big box retailers like Amazon, Target, and Home Depot, or from smaller independent brokers. Different programs have common product mixes and item types, and knowing what program you're currently working on can help you make better decisions when filling out the processing form or doing research to find important information for an item. For example, knowing that you are working a target load would help point you toward the target website if you need to research a particular item. If you are struggling with a specific program, let your manager know so they can help you navigate those challenges and work to optimize your postings when working with those programs. In conclusion, while these guidelines will be a big help, there's still a lot of situations in which you will struggle to know what the right answers are to select in the processing form. Our items can come in all shapes, sizes, and conditions, and it can be challenging to always know the right answer. Always ask your manager, assistant manager, or an experienced peer for assistance if you are not sure what is the right thing to do. Remember that you are the first person to see an item, and the auction listings you create have a tremendous impact on how much the items sell for, the satisfaction our customers have with our auctions, and the overall faith customers have in our brand. Take pride in your work and create the best listings you can. Thank you for attending this training.